This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
If you're a seeker, don't miss the inspiring book Shamanic Awakening, Between the Dark and the Daylight. This remarkable work chronicles shamanic counselor and indigenously trained dream decoder Sandra Cochran's 35 years of experience with diverse wisdom keepers throughout the Americas. Sandy's initiations across the British Isles, Turkey, Greece, and Egypt, combined with her knowledge of symbology, psychology, and myth, influence her dream blog and workshops. Sandy offers private readings, sacred international journeys, a meditative CD, and her book, Shamanic Awakening, to encourage you as you navigate your earth walk and create a deeper connection to yourself. Find this and more at her website, starwalkervisions.com.
A vast universe exists within and beyond our reality. What we realize with our five senses is but a tiny fraction of all that is real. Welcome to the World Beyond Radio Show. I'm your host, Joe Weigant, your guide and advocate as we remove the blinders of our everyday lives and experience together all that exists out there in the world beyond our world. Welcome today, folks. We've got an exciting show today. We have a special guest, Mr. Larry Lawson, who is from Florida. He is a law enforcement officer and also a paranormal investigator. And both sides of his career path are just as varied as you might imagine. Larry was born in Los Angeles and grew up in Toledo, Ohio, and he left for the state of Florida after graduating high school and never returned. He has a bachelor's degree in management and a master's degree in public administration from Troy State University. And he has been a law enforcement officer in Florida since 1980. He began his career as a corrections officer in Dade County Jail. He has also served as a duty patrol officer, an investigator and detective, and a detective sergeant. He has specialized in sexually related crimes, crimes against children, and the investigation of cult and deviant groups. He also served as the director of the Region 11 Law Enforcement and Corrections Training Academy, and he saw all basic law enforcement and corrections officer basic recruit training. He also served as the Criminal Justice Department chair at the Indian River State College in Fort Pierce, Florida. In 2013, Larry retired from the state of Florida service and returned just a few moments later to the city of Fellsmere, and he currently serves there as a detective. He has always had a desire to find the answers to the unknown. And as a child, he had a particular interest in UFOs and other similar phenomenon. His first direct connection with the paranormal was when he observed a full-body apparition in the Dade County Jail, where he began his law enforcement career. And since that time, his interest and study into the paranormal has continued in the creation of the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation. He and his team have had the opportunity to investigate some of the most haunted sites in the east central part of Florida. The most significant of those being in Fellsmere itself, where his team has uncovered numerous sites that have produced an incredible amount of evidence. The support of the city of Fellsmere has allowed him to host teams of investigators who want to conduct investigations in what he considers the most haunted area in this region of Florida. So we're going to take a moment to welcome Larry Lawson to our show today. How are you doing down there, Larry?
Joe, I'm nice and warm. How about you, Joe?
Oh, we're experiencing the onset of some freezing rain here in the next few minutes. So it's going to be a great time in Evansville, Indiana.
I shouldn't tease you. Really happy to be on the show, Joe. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Anytime that I can not only talk to another fellow policeman on the show, but also someone who shares an interest in the paranormal and the supernatural, I'm always willing to have a good time, and we're going to have a fun hour, I can tell.
No doubt.
So where did you first begin noticing things about the paranormal?
Well, obviously, as a kid, I had certain things would crop up. You hear or see things, and you pass it off. Or as a little kid, you cover your head under the covers. But the first significant event was, and you mentioned it a moment ago, was in the Dade County Jail. I was just a young corrections officer, just barely had turned 20 years old and getting my start in the law enforcement business. And clearly saw, we had a lieutenant that used to sneak up the back stairs to catch folks sleeping. And I saw what I thought was him walk by right in front of me down at the end of a hallway, a corridor. Turned out to be the corridor that we housed at that point individuals that were suicidal or at risk. So I hollered to the guys in the back, "Hey, lieutenant's on the catwalk." They got up, they go out the back of the control room. One goes right, one goes left. They come back and said, "Lawson, you're nuts. There's nobody out there." I said, "I'm telling you, the lieutenant, I just saw him." Well, the oddest thing about that is that corridor, I saw him walk down. Bottom line is the guy said, "He's not there. This place is haunted." The two older guys told me they'd seen strange things there. Well, I'd walked down this corridor where we kept the people on suicide watch, and you had to go down every 15 minutes, sign the log. And I'd done it 15 minutes before everything was clear. After this incident, I walked down that same corridor, and in front of one cell, I found a nice set of sheets neatly folded in front of the door. Couldn't have been there. I'm the one that checked the hallway the last time. It wasn't there. Turns out that was the cell that the last person hung themselves in with bed sheets. That was an awakening for me, if you will.
Wow, that is seriously it's almost kind of creepy. We're going to come back in just a few moments, and we're going to talk more about paranormal investigations. Folks, you're listening to our special guest, Larry Lawson from Florida, who is a paranormal investigator, and we'll be back in just a few moments after a few brief messages to talk more about the paranormal investigations. Stay tuned.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
How would you like to be able to read other people's minds? Well, the next best thing is here. When you know how to read a person's name, you know how the person thinks, feels, and behaves. Each letter in our name holds a key to unlock our true essence. Our name contains both our gifts and challenges in this lifetime. Mnemology science discovers personality secrets hidden in the placement of the letters of our names, including the first and last impression people remember about us. Sharon shows us how to interpret the arrangement of letters as outlined in her book, Know the Name, Know the Person. Sharon Lynn Wyeth created mnemology science after 18 years of research and testing her theories, and has supported thousands of people around the world in understanding themselves and others better. You'll enjoy Sharon's unique teachings as she shares her system to learn the gifts behind your given birth name. Even if you don't like your birth name, there are jewels in this book. If you're thinking of changing your name, ready to name your child, or wanting to get along better with others, this is the book for you. If you'd like to improve your relationships and change your life for the better, get the book today, Know the Name, Know the Person, or visit www.knowthename.com. That's www.knowthename.com.
Take a step back in time and discover old Florida cuisine at Marsh Landing Restaurant in Fellsmere, Florida. Enjoy delicacies such as frog legs, gator tail, catfish, and swamp cabbage, or enjoy the more traditional cuisine such as hand-cut Angus steaks, ribs, and seafood. Join us for breakfast with a southern flair featuring sweet potato pancakes, biscuits and gravy, and much more. Planning a party? Marsh Landing's private dining rooms can accommodate groups from 8 to 80 people. While you visit, enjoy the historic pictures, artifacts, and stories that line the walls. Marsh Landing is truly a unique experience. Marsh Landing Restaurant, 44 North Broadway in historic downtown Fellsmere, or visit marshlandingrestaurant.com. Marsh Landing, old Florida cuisine at its best.
Welcome back to the World Beyond Radio Show. I'm your host, Joe Weigant. This hour, we are talking to Larry Lawson, who is a law enforcement officer in Florida and also a paranormal investigator. Larry, whenever we left to go to break, we were talking about the bed sheets that you found in the cell where someone had hanged themselves years before. Can you go on about that a little bit more?
Well, it really was as simple as that. Back in those days, things were a little bit more. When you had folks on suicide watch, they were only allowed limited things, obviously, so they could not do harm to themselves. And in this particular case, no sheets were allowed in the cells for that purpose. Mm-hmm. And to check and see, you check the inmate, they're fine. And they weren't in the cell; they were actually sitting outside the big iron gate leading to the cell from the walkway, and it was just sitting there. And I, of course, turned to the other two, thought they were playing a trick on the rookie or something, but it definitely wasn't them. And the simple reason it wasn't them, I was sitting at the control booth. I would have had to push the button to let them in, and neither of them had left the room. So that was just a very, very an eye-opening event. I've always had an interest in the unknown, finding out the answers to the questionable. I guess that's why I became a detective. But this particular incident really got me thinking about the other side a lot more seriously. And it's been an interest that's been growing year after year.
Now, how did you get your start in actually investigating paranormal experiences or hauntings or anything like that? Did you just start immediately there, going and trying to record voices and EVPs, or was there a lot of study involved first? How did you get into the point where you have progressed to investigating certain incidences?
It actually took a number of years. I mean, especially back then, there were very, very few people that actually, openly at least, investigated the paranormal. So there was really no place to go. Certainly, I had no internet back then to go and check and find out things. So it was one of those situations where life just went on. I every time I saw a building that looked interesting, I wondered, maybe checked it out. Obviously, being a cop, and I spent many, many years on the midnight watch. You'd go to a building, a call where an alarm went off, and there's no logical explanation, but you'll walk in, you'll hear footsteps or see something. So that was something that just kind of came with time. Obviously, after 2000, 2003, this became a little bit more mainstream. There was more information out there, and began to do it informally. I actually started with my son, who's now in college. He expressed an interest, and probably the next time we did anything of significance as far as formal investigating was at the St. Augustine Lighthouse in St. Augustine, Florida. Highly recommend that to anybody that's interested in doing paranormal studies. That study's crazy. We were in the lighthouse. Long story, I won't bore you with all of it, but we were sitting in the lighthouse by ourselves. We managed to. The other tour kept going because we'd been there earlier. The people that were running it just said, "You guys can have the lighthouse to yourself for a couple hours." And we were sitting in there and clearly heard a little girl laughing on, I think, the third or fourth floor. And the interesting part of that was several young ladies died there during the construction of the tower. And there's only two ways that we could have heard that laugh. The place was either bugged or we actually heard it. And there's no indication that anybody there had done anything improper. So we actually heard that laugh. And that really is when it started for both of us. My older son, Ryan, is actually the one who came up with the name Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation. And we formally got started about 2011.
Nice. So did you just simply go out with digital recorders or tape recorders and just try to catch EVPs, or did you have any cameras at that time, or what kind of equipment were you using then?
Basically, I went out and bought a couple of simple digital recorders. Were just becoming more popular then. We went out with recorders and took our cameras, and really learned as we went how to do it and how to investigate. Now, what I did at this point with this very rudimentary equipment is I took my law enforcement training, my detective training, if you will, and I began to apply it to these investigations. And it allowed me to build a protocol, if you will, to gather evidence, keep it, store it, and look at it objectively, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And obviously from there it grew. Equipment costs money. We've got wives, and wives don't always understand. What do you mean you want to spend $100 on a K2 meter? What is that? Fortunately, my wife is very understanding, and we began to grow and buy little bits of equipment here and there. Found some other folks that were of like mind, and that's when the group really began to solidify. And we started doing a few more formal investigations. We would, people would ask us to check their houses out. I particularly like to do historical sites myself, because I'm a historian buff, and nut is a better way to put it. And we just began to grow with as our equipment, we purchased more equipment, it became more sophisticated. Certainly our techniques became more sophisticated. And it's just grown to where we're at today, where frankly, where I'm at in Fellsmere, and that's a whole story in itself, I'm actually in the process of creating a paranormal laboratory of the city of Fellsmere because of the many haunted sites there and the unbelievable support I have from the city.
Outstanding. I want to talk about the paranormal laboratory here in just a little bit later, but a lot of people get into paranormal investigations because of a healthy skepticism about the nature of what happens beyond death. And many of them either are curious and need to know better answers, or they are just trying to either debunk everything that they encounter and try to find some kind of a natural explanation for it. But how does a background in law enforcement aid you in investigating some of these wild occurrences?
That's a great question. I will tell you this, there's a third group of folks out there too, and that's the folks that want to just go on for a quick, cheap thrill. That's the third group out there. I just wanted to mention that real quick. And
yeah, but I'm not talking about those kinds. Yeah, I'm talking about the people who really want to do some serious work.
Right. How does my background? Essentially, as a detective, and you know this yourself, Joe, as a detective, you have to be very organized, very structured in your collection of information and evidence, because what we have to do is present our evidence to a jury to convict a bad guy. Mm-hmm. And that's the tact I've taken with this. Granted, we're not trying to convict a bad guy, but what we are trying to do is create the evidence, create the preponderance of evidence that the paranormal exists, that the supernatural exists, that spirits exist. So the approach I take is as if I was investigating a homicide, is collect the evidence, store it properly, objectively review it. Look to find the proper answer, not the answer I want or an answer that I have from a preconceived notion, but just where the evidence leads me. And that's allowed us to create a protocol where we take in evidence, we review it properly, we store it properly. My team currently has some folks that review the evidence. I have somebody else that's almost, for lack of a better term, my evidence room custodian. He keeps it. And with that is what we're trying to do to build our case, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So now how many other law enforcement officers do you have in your team?
Right now, we've got one former law enforcement officer, two active ones besides myself. My daughter, who's a police officer herself in the town of Sebastian, has assisted a few times. So right now we've got three full-time cops, one former cop, a couple of school teachers, and some other folks from different other fields.
Now, a lot of teams, whenever they go out, like you said, they're trying to collect evidence. And you are actually trying to build a case for a particular event or a particular site that may have some activity, and you're trying to build a case that activity is or is not actually occurring in our frame of reference. Mm-hmm. As a law enforcement officer, do you think that your investigation techniques can produce better evidence or actually a better case than someone who's simply trying to either conduct experiments to result in a particular outcome or conduct experiments to try to find better techniques? How does your investigative ability compute with that?
Okay, I think all three angles are legitimate and appropriate. Certainly, any individual that is looking to create better technique, I mean, that's helpful, because by creating more efficient, accurate techniques to investigate, we get better evidence. Individuals that are looking for a particular answer, I do get a little worried about, because when you don't go in with an open mind, willing to look at all angles, you tend to get the answers you want rather than the answers that are there, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I prefer folks to go in with an open mind of, let's see what we've got here. Let's see where the evidence takes us. Certainly, if you're working to create better techniques, better equipment, that is part of where I come from. Also, we're always getting better. You ask about how my background helps. One of the things that we do is interviewing the client, the person that has called us there, and understanding where they're coming from and understanding where that mindset is can be really helpful if you have a background in conducting interviews. So that's one area where my criminal background certainly does help. Mm-hmm. And my healthy bit of skepticism, I hear a noise. Okay, is that a footstep or is that just the wind hitting a shutter? You've got to keep that perspective also. And a lot of folks have that. Certainly most investigators that I've dealt with have that attitude. I just think that my law enforcement background allows me to, how to put this, separate the fact from fiction a little bit better, because that's what I've done for a living for 30 some odd years.
How many times have you gone on investigations and immediately, or maybe not even immediately, but after you've been talking to the potential client for some time, it becomes apparent that it's not entirely a physical or even a supernatural occurrence that's happening, that this may be an indication of some kind of a psychological event that's going on?
Either psychological or I want this to actually be happening. Two little differences there. Several times we've interviewed folks and we walked in, and part of my protocol is, and it can sometimes be very, very touchy. You got to be careful. But I've determined that individuals have had some sort of psychiatric treatment episodes. Perhaps they're on certain levels of medication. And then once you add that to the background that you do on the site, you come to the realization it may not be a supernatural event. That's happened a number of times. I've also had a number of times where people want this they've watched the TV shows. And some of the TV shows are great. I'm not knocking that, but it's just like you and I watch people watching cop shows. They actually think that we can take a fingerprint and in 15 minutes find out who the culprit is and arrest them. Same concept with folks that have sometimes watched a lot of these shows, and they want it to happen so bad that they're hearing things and they're developing scenarios in their own mind, and their perception becomes their reality. And I've had that happen a number of times.
I've also experienced both of those different kinds of scenarios myself, where after a few moments of being in the house and seeing what's going on, that it's either the client is experiencing that all within themselves, or in a lot of cases too, Yeah, I just want you to verify that it's happening, but I don't want anything to be done about it.
Yes, had that too.
So we're going to come back in just a few moments. We've got a few messages we need to get to, and we're going to come back and talk to Larry Lawson, a paranormal investigator. You are listening to the World Beyond Radio Show. I'm your host, Joe Weigant. Please stick around.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
While science pursues fact, magic accesses the quantum level, bridging random facts to form truth. As long as science and magic remain separate and polarized, the truth cannot be known. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka. Join me on the Science of Magic radio program, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. During each episode, I'll be speaking with experienced and respected scientists and mystics. From astrologers to astronomers, from medical doctors to shaman, the scientific method to dowsing and intuition, we'll weave together information from seemingly divergent practices to promote unity and enlightenment. Join me, Gwilda Wiyaka, and the Science of Magic right here on the Mutual Broadcast Network. For more information, visit www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Gibbs A. Williams, Ph.D., is a practicing psychoanalyst, supervisor, researcher, and author in New York City. Much of his life has been dedicated to understanding nature and the uses of meaningful coincidences or synchronicities. His radical and original non-Jungian, non-mystical, non-magical theory of synchronicities illuminates much of the fog surrounding this challenging and perplexing topic. His ideas and manners are fresh, presented in a style that is both entertaining and highly informative. He is also an expert on crisis intervention, specially focused on violence reduction for the police and citizens, mastering anxiety, frustration, and stress without the use of medication, and effectively preventing and treating heroin addiction. Dr. Williams can be contacted at his email address at gwwilliamsny11@aol.com or visit his website at Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
True healing must address 4 levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, for us to live joyful and productive lives. We tend to treat 3 of the 4, leaving the spiritual languishing. If you're tired of the same dysfunctional patterns cropping up in your life, Soul Balancing is for you. Trixie Phelps, owner and founder of Soul Balancing, is a naturally gifted energy healer trained in numerous esoteric forms, including shamanism. Trixie has created a powerful modality that safely and effectively clears your energetic field. A soul balancing session can remove interference, heal trauma, and restore your hope. Contact Trixie for a life-changing long-distance session today, www.soulbalancing.world.
Welcome back to the World Beyond Radio Show. I'm your host, Joe Weigant. We are talking with Larry Lawson this hour, and he is a police officer in Florida and also a paranormal investigator. Larry, how is your relationship with other investigating teams in your area?
Absolutely outstanding. I mean, the cohesiveness among groups in our area is unbelievable, and I know for a fact it's not like that everywhere. So I consider myself very, very fortunate. We've got terrific folks in this part of Florida. Off the Trails Paranormal, plug for them. Down in Port St. Lucie is a great example. War Party Paranormal down in West Palm. I could go on. Great groups up here, so it's very good actually.
So, whenever I do my investigations, and the team that I've put together is mostly a team of sensitives or mediums or other people who can sense energies or spirit or other things that are nearby. So do you work with sensitives or mediums, and what is your opinion of their kind of work?
That's a great question, because early on, typical hard-headed cop, didn't really... had a couple of bad experiences on some missing persons cases years and years ago. But since I've evolved as an individual, as a person, I've come to really appreciate folks with that gift. And so, yes, I've got a sensitive on my team that has done just tremendous work. And most of the teams that we have one or two folks that have a medium or a sensitive in it. And I think that's an important part of putting together your evidence and your cases. If you're going to be closed-minded to say there's only one way to do it, then you're never going to find the answer. Now, I'm as sensitive as a rock. At least that's the joke I like to say. And therefore, I'm the kind of guy that needs something I can put my hands on and see it. But I've come to appreciate the individual that can say, I feel or I see this. And then I corroborate that information with perhaps more tangible things like reactions to equipment, and that has happened numerous times. So I think there's an important part for everybody at this table. I enjoy working with them. The folks that are sensitives on our teams do a tremendous job, and I think a team without a sensitive is really losing out.
That's the way I have run my particular outfit for years is, matter of fact, I didn't even start taking a recorder until my last couple of investigations, and I've probably done 50 of them. And so most of what we do is all by bringing more people, weirdos like myself who can talk to dead people, and try to get them in there and see what we can do. Whenever you are on an investigation, and you, through your investigative techniques and backed up with information that's coming in from your medium or your sensitive on your team, and you have determined that, yes, there is something that's actually happening here that is not in this physical realm. There's a spirit, there is some kind of an earthbound spirit or whatever happening in this house, and this is why these problems are occurring. Does your team try to create some kind of a solution or resolution to that, so that way it's no longer a bothersome occurrence?
As in moving a spirit on? Is that what?
Yeah,
yeah.
that,
okay.
Yes.
We had one individual that was particularly adept at that, very, very good at it. She's unfortunately in France now. But yeah, there was a particular case where, and it was in Fellsmere, frankly, where we had an individual, a home, an entire family that was having some issues, and we were able to identify an entity that had just not moved on. And it was kind of a sad case where an individual had been bullied. Probably in life, they probably had some mental health issues, I guess is a good way to put it. And we were able to successfully move it on, and to the point where the family stopped having issues. Now, it's easy to say, well, yeah, they wanted to see it happen, so it's psychologically they didn't have any other issues. But when you got 4 or 5 people in the family saying, yeah, it's different, yes, we're not having the same problems, that gives me some validity. If it was one person saying, oh, yes, the problem is solved, you got to be a little skeptical. But in this case, we had like 4 or 5 people saying the problem was solved. So that's one example of how we used a medium to move a spirit on into the light and have them go home.
So, what has been your most fascinating or your most harrowing investigation yet to date?
Fascinating. Here was an incident it was a place called the Holstrom House. We work really closely with our historical society here in Indian River County, and we were in one of their facilities, the Holstrom House, one of the older houses in our county. And we had a session going where we had a pair of divining rods, and that was another piece of equipment. I had some real trouble early on grasping and finding validity in it, but that has since changed. So one person was using the divining rods, then we had a couple other pieces of equipment and a sensitive. All of them came up with the same answers. And the interesting answer was the spirits were moving freely between our perception of heaven and this dimension. And to me, I thought that was really fascinating because it was confirmed not only with the equipment, but also the sensitive and the divining rods. And to me, that was significant. Not something I'd ever considered before. That it's just like a passageway open back and forth. I don't know how you feel about it, but that was significant for me.
Yeah, I've also run into the portals like that where things can pass through like that. Have you ever dealt with anything of a darker variety? Some of the not really things that have ever been human in life here as we know it, but things from the other dimensions or other areas that are a little more sinister in their approach.
Yeah, certainly. We've run into some. They were either very angry former human spirits, or they were something that was never human. Fortunately, I've never been scratched, been touched, hit a couple times. Our team sensitive has encountered it a couple of times on investigations, and we have some directions that we can go for folks that'll help us with that if we feel it's something that was non-human. But it's happened. I've been fortunate. I haven't had a lot of that, but I've had several times where, yes, we've come across darker forces. The one place, it was a former penal institution. We got a really ugly voice one time. My son was walking out. We had a recorder going, and he just made a comment about it's a shame they were locked up here in life, and they're still here in the afterlife. And we of course, didn't hear it right away until we heard the tape later. But very clearly, you hear a "Hell, we ain't dead," and it was pretty obvious it was an inmate from the sound of it. So yeah, we've come across the darker ones.
That is nice. We ain't dead.
Yeah.
In my experience, whenever they shed their mortal coil, they actually are just as alive as they were just moments before. They don't have a physical body to wear around anymore. So I think it's important for all of us investigators to understand that they, until they go into the light, they still think that they are just as alive as they were, and in most senses they are. So tell me a little bit about Paranormal Laboratory.
Well, this is a concept that I've been developing over the last several months. And you've got to understand, you've got to have a group, an entity that is supportive of what you're doing. And the city of Fellsmere has done that for me. I mean, they trust me. I've been there for a while. So they've allowed me access to city buildings and anything that's owned by the city to conduct investigations and experiments in. So, and we've got about 5 spots in the city that I regularly go to. So the concept has come if we've I believe there's different types of entities in several different spots. So what better place than to conduct experiments to find out exactly what it is on the other side? Because that's what I'm about. I am about finding the answers. What a better place to do it than in a city where they support what you do and give you access to do it in. So the concept's going to be setting up some permanent stations, inviting teams in to conduct experiments. Obviously, documentation is everything. You and I both know in law enforcement, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So that's going to be a really important aspect of this. And as time grows, we're going to be, everything from audio, visual, permanently on. That's my dream here, and having teams come in regularly to conduct their own investigations, and of course sharing the information. And that's another thing that's really huge, Joe. We as a field of paranormal investigators, we have to share. You and I both know law enforcement wasn't like that for many years. It's mine, mine, mine. That's been changing. It's been changing since 9/11. Well, it needs to get better in our realm of paranormal investigations too. We need to share information. We need to have a repository, if you will, for information, so that you up in Indiana might have something that, and especially with your gifts, you might connect with something that has some connection to Florida. So you may need to look and go to that repository and say, has anybody had this happen, or does anybody have this information? And you're able to access that information as part of, the bigger world paranormal investigators. So that's where I'm seeing this laboratory going, as being the crucible of putting all of this together to come up with the answers, to come up with the evidence, to share the information amongst all of us so that we can come up with a definitive answer eventually.
That's very interesting, because there are a lot of groups out there that, from just from what I see on television and from what I've experienced with some groups, is that they want to collect a lot of evidence, and they keep this a huge database of all these EVPs and other things like that. But yeah, I think just like law enforcement, we need to share that kind of evidence. And if there are sensitives out there who have a particular gift or have a particular ability, to be able to work with a number of different kinds of teams to try to find those answers and try to arrive at those conclusions, which will give us a better picture about what's going on out there. That's very interesting. Whenever you start putting something like that together, please keep me in the loop on that.
Oh, Joe, you're part of it. Just plan on that, man. I am a big believer in sharing, and certainly an individual like yourself is, you're part of it. Just consider that right now, my friend.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that, weird fellows like me who can talk to dead people could be a part of a scientific type community. So that's pretty interesting.
I've been asked a lot of times, how as a cop you can believe in this type of thing? And my answer is, do you want a cop that's closed-minded, that only sees one side of the story and it's the story he wants to see? Or do you want somebody that can look at the evidence objectively and come up with the answer regardless of what that answer is? And Joe, your gifts are part of that. We can't say, it's easy for me to say, since I'm not sensitive, give me a picture, give me an EVP, show me a video of something moving, and that's the only evidence I'll take. If I do that, then I'm closed-minded. I've got to take that evidence that I'm looking for and what your gifts are and put it all together for us to come up with a collective answer to the question.
I couldn't agree more. Have you already... well, we're just about ready to cut to a break, so I'm not going to ask a long answer question at this point. So we're going to spend a little time cutting off to a break right here. And folks, you are listening to the World Beyond Radio Show. I'm your host, Joe Weigant. We have been talking to Larry Lawson this hour, and we're going to come back with one more segment and ask a few more questions about paranormal investigating. Stick around, folks. We'll be right back.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Wouldn't you love to know the secret to everything? Well then, meet Dr. Kimberly McGeorge and her cutting-edge breakthrough knowledge that combines science with possibility. Dr. Kimberly brings real-life answers and healing to those open to alternative solutions. She teaches solution-based programs and classes that will change all areas of your life forever. Specializing in conscious creation, intuitive readings, and energy medicine, you can rapidly shift health, relationships, business, and money and abundance challenges quickly. Receive her best-selling book, Secret to Everything, at no cost by going to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone. That's right, transformation can start now. Just go to secrettoeverything.com/X-Zone and receive Dr. Kimberly's book for free.
Little children aren't the only ones afraid of the dark. Millions of soldiers return from war zones with PTSD, anger, frustration, fear, and loneliness, much of which surfaces during the darkness of the night. You have the chance to change the lives of these American heroes. Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us provides free MP3 players for these men and women. With a list of 3 million songs in 16 different styles, 100,000 audiobooks, and 30,000 old-time radio programs, every veteran can find something to soothe and comfort them at no cost. All our players contain an 8-hour audio program designed to help veterans fall asleep. With 1,500 plus vets now participating, it's our goal to deliver 10,000 audio players this year. Go to our website at songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us. Help us help a veteran make it through the night.
You're listening to the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
Welcome back to the World Beyond Radio Show. I'm your host, Joe Weigant, and as always, we are doing our very best to bring you the best in alternative health, paranormal, and supernatural and spirituality topics. Our show, as always, is produced and brought to you by the ever-expanding leader in New Age paranormal and alternative health and supernatural programming, the X Zone Broadcast Network, and Relmar McConnell Media Company, at their corporate headquarters and master control in Ontario, Canada. To learn more about the World Beyond, your host, or a wealth of other amazing show hosts and their shows, please visit www.xzbn.net. To contact me about being a guest on my show or to learn more about my programming, you can always email me at Joe Weigant, that's Joe, WEIGANT, at xzbn.net. You can also find out more on my websites, paranormalpeace.com and Reiki Choice, that's REIKI choice.com. Our special guest this hour has been Larry Lawson, who is a police officer in Florida and also a paranormal investigator. He can be reached at his websites, paranormalstakeout.com and paranormalfbi.com. He can also be reached by email at ghostguy59@gmail.com or at Larry Lawson, Larry, LAWSON, @xzbn.net. And as always, we appreciate you tuning in and listening to our show. Larry, we've got a few minutes left at the end of our program. What is your favorite piece of equipment to use when you're going on vacation or your investigations?
Vacation, that works too.
Hey, I like vacations. It's always
absolutely
good.
I just like the old-fashioned tape recorder. That seems to be the one thing that never lets me down, and where I get most of my really, really good evidence. You know, you can buy all kinds of fancy equipment, and a lot of it works great, and I use it. But sometimes you just got to keep it simple, and the digital recorder is the easiest way to do it, in my opinion.
Do you hook up any camera systems or any special lighting systems, laser grids, or
Oh yeah, we use. I mean, we've got several laser grids that we use. Certainly, the alternative lighting, infrared, the whole bit. We've got the FLIR that we use, and I actually like the FLIR, but it just and all of it's cool. We've gotten evidence on all of it, but it just seems like that good old-fashioned digital recorder just is my mainstay. But yeah, we use the millimeters, K2s, all the typical stuff that you'd see, camera systems.
Do you have any experience using the what they call a spirit box or ghost box or the Ovilus or anything like that?
Wow. Okay, that's an excellent question. May take me a minute to answer it.
That's fine.
Very suspect of things like the Ovilus at first. I'll be honest with you. Whenever you got something that can spit out words from a programmed bank, as a cop, that makes me suspicious. It could be tampered with. It could be. I didn't like it at first. There's the Spirit Box, and there's now a new one called the Portal. A guy named Steve Huff built it. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I have not looked at that yet.
It's interesting. Once again, it scans the radio waves, and you get answers through the radio waves, which theoretically is many times how the spirits will communicate with us. And I wasn't 100% sure of it, but I had my good friends from War Party Paranormal up to Fellsmere doing an investigation, because we like to bring folks in and have them work in our place also. And they brought one of these portals in, which is very similar to a ghost box. And we're sitting in what we call the choir room, and we're asking it a question: how many are in the room? And it comes back clearly says 7. Another person asks the question, well, how many are here including you? The portal clearly said 8. Okay, that's getting interesting. Can you tell us who's here? And sure enough, I personally heard 3 or 4 names of the people in the room on the ghost box. So I said, okay, this is getting interesting. Now I'm going to jump into it. I said, now, you got to understand, I love Fellsmere. I think it's a wonderful place, and certainly is a hotbed for this type of work. But doesn't roll off the tongue like Orlando or Miami, if you'll understand what I'm saying. So I asked, okay, can you tell us where we are at right now? Twice out of the portal, Fellsmere. I became a believer at that moment, because that's just not something that could be randomly picked out. I mean, it's possible to hear Miami or Orlando, Los Angeles, but Fellsmere, really? Twice? No. I became a believer at that moment that there is something out there that is able to manipulate the waves. And that goes back to what I said about keeping the open mind, too. I saw something new that could not be explained, and now I'm more accepting of it. 15, 20 years ago, I don't know that I was that way, but I am now.
That's not really a word that's normally programmed into a electronic device. That's not a common word.
My point exactly.
Yeah. We did a investigation down at Waverly Hills last year, and a ghost box was being used for that. And sometimes it was answering questions in a way that was consistent, and then sometimes it was coming up with words that I wasn't picking up in the area that when I was tuning in. So that's been one of my few experiences with Ghost Box. So I'm still the jury's still out on that one, if you will.
Well, from my point of view, I'm finding, and once again, I'm not sensitive, but I'm finding that if we got direct answers all the time, then we would have already uncovered all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, we're still trying to figure out how this communication thing works. So therefore, it's for it always to be accurate at this point, I would almost suspect somebody is manipulating it. So when you're getting some things that make sense, like Fellsmere, maybe some other words, maybe it's just because we haven't figured out that complete total line of communication yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something that John Edwards said a few years back in one of his books, and he's a famous psychic medium, of course.
Oh, I've read him, and he's one of the people that has helped me, but go ahead.
Yeah, he said in one of his books that whenever spirit wants to come communicate with us in this world, that it's a lot like trying to have a phone conversation at the bottom of a 12-foot swimming pool. It takes all the energy you've got just to get down there. And once you're there, you can't stay very long and you can't say very much.
Wow, that's
yeah.
That's
so that not only, oh sure it does, because it's not only explains why things like ghost boxes and other things like that can only grab little bits of words here and there, but also psychic mediums like myself and others, we get these little tiny pictures or indications or symbols or feelings or little blips of words or something like that. So it makes a lot of perfect sense in our investigative line of work. So where do you see the future of paranormal investigating going?
I see it becoming more sophisticated. I see more like-minded folks coming together with the intent and the desire to come up with the answers in a dedicated, structured way so that we can present it almost as if we were presenting it to a jury. I see the equipment getting better. I see fewer and fewer people doing it just for the fun of it. I mean, we'll always have that, and you need that to some extent. Mm-hmm. But I just see the whole profession starting to become more sophisticated. This is no longer a field of folks that wear funny hats and look weird. It's a group of people that are truly looking at it from a scientific as well as a spiritual angle. And I think that as we come together more and more, the future is going to be we're at least going to find the doorway, even if we can't completely walk through it. We're going to find the doorway to the answers.
That was going to be my next question was, do you think that more scientists in this field should accept a more spiritual mindset in these things? And is that necessary, or would that taint the water, so to speak?
What's necessary is not that they become more spiritual, but they become more accepting of other aspects of the study. Once we close our minds off to it's only my way, it can only be found the way I'm looking at it, that's when we stop finding answers. Scientists need to remain scientists and conduct their studies in a scientific way, but they must grow and evolve to the point where other aspects are acceptable, and people with your talents, for example, have valid information and putting it all together. Does that make sense? Am I getting that out right?
Yes. Keep going.
I don't have to be a psychic, and I'm convinced I never will be, but I accept what you say, Joe. And when you combine it with what I'm finding on scientific equipment, there we have validity. So I may not be psychic, but I accept what you say, and I understand that it's part of the big puzzle. Because let's face it, this is a spiritual puzzle. It's not going to be found just through scientific equipment. It's going to be found through a combination of all of our efforts, and all of us looking at our efforts equally.
Even if that means that I can't prove what I'm seeing.
Well, there lies the question. You may not be able to prove it, but perhaps somewhat time as we evolve scientifically, what you're seeing that we can't prove might be provable on another piece of equipment. But there's also a thing called faith too, Joe. As long as you're looking at it objectively and ready to say, okay, maybe it's something else. But look, Joe said this. I know Joe has gotten this right 10 times before. My piece of equipment has validated part of this. It does. You don't need to prove it to me, and I don't need to say it happened just because my equipment said so. It's got to be a combination of the two. That's where I'm
absolutely. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today, Larry. I have enjoyed this immensely, and we are going to say goodbye. And to all of our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in. We have had a great day. Thank you for listening to the World Beyond Radio Show.